What is up, metahumans? Welcome to the third episode of our Prismverse Clash base type series. Today we are going to be talking about the wall base, which is going to be one of the most common and most important base types that your faction can have, because your wall bases are going to determine the level of cooperation that's going on in your faction. And the more people you can get to cooperate within a single faction, the more success you're going to have. It's going to have sort of a compounding effect on the amount of points you can score in a given time, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. So the previous two episodes have been based around the fob, which you see mocked up here, and then the core base, which is where you normally do all of your securing for your prism deviations. Your wall bases are going to be exactly that. They're going to be a wall between your core base and the outside world. So I've got a little bit of a visual aid here, and we're going to bring that up. Here we go. So this is the map that we were given by the devs during the dev stream a few days ago. And so I'm just going to use this map to kind of express to you what I'm looking at. So imagine, if you will, that this is your core base right here. And so your wall bases are literally a wall that goes around that. Now, the best walls that you're going to be able to create are squares, because you can literally butt your bases up against each other, right? They'll snap to each other if you build bases right next to other bases. So you're going to want to absolutely do this as a wall. As a square. That is going to be the easiest way to get that working. Now, the next thing that I would like to talk about is I would like to talk a little bit about how to use a wall base. And when I mean that, I mean what different types of configurations you might be able to use to get the most out of your core bases, so that you can secure the most deviations at a single time in the fewest number of bases. So I think the smallest size wall to core ratio that you want is a 4 wall base. Now, this structure is actually not going to have a core base at all. It's actually just going to be 4 wall bases, right? And you're going to build them in a nice, neat little square. And what you're going to do is you're going to build 2 sides of each of these bases as walls, so that you have walls going all the way around, right? You're going to ring turrets on the outside. You're going to get lots and lots of nutcrackers and things like that. And you're going to really, really fortify the outside of these, and then make layers of defenses throughout the base. And then when you get to the absolute center here, you're going to put maybe 1 or 2 securement units per base in the center here to defend. Now, why is this important? This is important because when you do this, you get way more collaboration than if maybe you did a single base. So if you have a single base, you want as many of your securement units as possible to be using nutcrackers, right? Because your nutcrackers are really good defensive options for your securement units. So if you're by yourself and you just put a single base in here, then you're really only going to be using 1 securement unit, because you need as much defensive power as you can possibly get. And so you're only going to be able to secure 1 prism deviation at a time, which means that the most points you can get is, I believe it's 400 points in 2 hours, is the most points you can get as a solo. Now, then let's take that over to this 4 base, right? With a 4 base, you still get 19 nutcrackers, but you now have 3 other people with you. Those 3 people can also bring back prism deviations. And so the most you can get in this base, if you're only using the people who have bases here, even if you're still getting those 19 nutcrackers, is the most points you can get here is 1,600 in 2 hours. So you're quadrupling that potential, and you're also quadrupling the number of people here defending. Now, you are creating a larger footprint, you are bringing more prism deviations to a singular location. So the brightness of those, of the indicator on the map that's going to show when somebody picks up a prism deviation is going to be brighter and bigger. And so more people are going to be drawn here. But you're also going to have significantly better defenses in this structure. Now let's go to the next tier that I think is important. The next tier structure here is going to be a 9 base structure. Now this is one more base than you actually have the ability to have in your hive, right? You can only have 8 bases in your hive. So this 9 base structure requires you to seek someone outside your hive, or to have 2 kind of smaller hives, right? 2 of these 4-person hives, or a 4 and a 5-person hive could get together and make one of these 9 base structures. The reason this is so important is you're not going to be putting any defenses on this middle core base right here. All of your defenses are going to go in these 8 outer bases. These walls are going to use all of their securement units to build defenses. They're all going to have 20 nutcrackers, right? You're going to have all of your turrets. You're going to have all of that stuff out here. And then on the inside, you have the ability to put all 20 of your securement units to work. Now, here you're only using 9 bases, but you have the potential to use 20 securement units to secure prism deviations. So now you have the ability to bring in even more people from your outside to assist you in farming those prism deviations. So now if you have the ability to get 20 here, and you can get up to 400 points each time, you're now looking at being able to get 8,000? Yeah, that's 8,000 points. Now that would require everybody to get the rarest prism deviation, which only occurs in Phase 3, which is extremely unlikely to happen. But even if you took the smallest tier, which I believe is going to be 40 prism points when you secure the lowest tier of prism deviations, you're still getting 800 points here when you secure all those points, versus you would only get 40 here, and you would only get 160 in the size 4. Now let's take this out even again. For just 3 more bases, right, for a total of 12 bases, which would be 3 4-person hives could get together and make this structure. You could ring 2 core bases with outer bases. Now, this is probably not a very secure way to go about this, but you could just have a single ring around 2 core bases. I would probably prefer to go with a double ring, but if you only had 12 people, this is probably where you're going to get the most value. And now you can have up to 40 securement units in these core bases here. And these 40 securement units can secure you 40 prism deviations. So even at the low end here, you're looking at 1,600 points available. And again, that means that you're bringing 40 people over to defend. So you're bringing the 12 people here, and then maybe you put out on your faction chat or something like that, hey, we're doing a prism securement. Anybody else in the faction who wants to do prism securement with us, go get a prism, bring it to this location. They bring it to this location, you friend them up. They can use your securement units. All it requires is for you to be friends with them and allow them to access your structures. They don't have to be able to access your storages. They don't have to be able to build. They don't have to be able to do any of that. But when they put a prism deviation in your securement unit, they are the owners of that prism deviation. So they get the points for their personal score. But your faction gets the points altogether. So you could have 40 people here defending these 12 bases. And that's a whole lot of firepower to be putting out and to be defending here with. Now the next thing that I think you would want to do is I definitely wouldn't want to increase the number of core bases that I'm using. until I increase the number of layers. So let's add a whole nother layer around these two bases. I think I kind of messed up a little there. We're going to make it all right. So now we can have 2 layers. And now we're looking at a 5x5 with 2 layers on each side. Actually, no, sorry, a 5x6. A 5x6, so now you're looking at 30 bases. Now you still only have those 40 securement units, but you could use some of this inner layer to get additional securement units. So maybe this inner layer, you use 3 securement units from each of these 10 bases on this inner layer. Right, so you could get another 30 out of that. So now you'd have 70 securement units out of 30 bases. Now you're seeing how this is just having this multiplicative effect of the amount of defenses you have, and thus the amount of securement you can do at a time. And because those securements can happen concurrently, you're drastically increasing the amount of points your faction can earn inside of a given time. Now it's true that if each of these bases was just off here by itself, right, each of these bases could be doing 1 or 2 securements apiece, individually marked all over the place like this. And yes, it would spread your attackers thin, but it would also spread all of your defenders thin. And what the attackers could do, because you have a half hour to stop the securement, is they could split into groups of, say, 5 or 6, and they could attack each base individually with overwhelming power, because only one person is going to be sitting here defending this. So 6 people could come and attack this one, and they could eat this one in just a couple of minutes, and then they could eat this one in just a couple of minutes, and then they could eat this one in just a couple of minutes. And a single group of 5 or 6 could go destroy maybe 5 or 6 bases. But a single person can't defend a base against 5 or 6 people. But 30 people can defend 30 bases against 30 people fairly easily. Because you have all of this extra structure going on, right? They have to build through, or they have to break through so much more. They have to fight you so many more people, right? It's such more even odds. And you just have a much, much better chance of getting much, much more points, much, much more often. So it's definitely important that you go through the effort of making friends, right? You don't have to make friends with other hives too. Make friends with your solos and your small group players, and give them the ability to use your securement units, and then let them know when you're going to be doing big prism deviation securements. Right? This right here, this structure, is the responsibility of the hardcore players. If you want your faction to win, and you play 6, 7, 8 hours a day, then you are the one who is responsible for creating this to anchor your entire faction, so that your entire faction has somewhere to go that is extremely fortified and can defend when they need to do securements, so that they can focus on other things, right? They can have bases in the safe zone where they can grow crops and create food for you and themselves and everybody else out there, to give them more firepower so that this defense can go better. Right? They want to have the ability to raise creatures so that you can have 6 creatures in each of these bases with all the good traits that you want, so that you have better defenses. Right? They can be building fobs so that they can teleport over whenever you're attacking a base. They can teleport an extra fob over so that you can have another base to attack with, instead of having to have more bases to defend with. Because you don't want to be wasting all of your bases on securements. You want to be able to transfer bases for fobs. You want to be able to have safe zone bases. You want to be able to build structures like this. And so the more focused your faction is, the more likely you are to win. And I really think it's going to come down to the faction that works together the best is going to be the faction that succeeds. And that starts with the hardcore players, right? If your hardcore players aren't actively trying to help your more casual players, then those casual players don't have the time, they don't have the in-game knowledge, they don't have the resources to be able to start that collaboration. So the work, the effort is on the hardcore players to make things like this happen. And if your faction is running around in 5 to 10 person teams, and the enemy faction is running around in 20 to 30 person teams, you absolutely cannot defeat them. You will lose 100% of the time. So your faction getting together is the best way to success, and these bases and these large structures like this are absolutely the best way to success. So the next thing I want to talk about a little bit is I want to talk a little bit about build concepts. Now, your wall bases are going to very much rely on the terrain around you. These are going to be static structures, right? You're never going to move your core base. You're never going to move your wall bases, because if you do that, you're never going to be able to get them all right back into the exact same position. And if you can't get them into the exact same position, then it is ultimately going to weaken your base. So we're not actually going to build a mock-up like we did of this fob. We're just going to talk about what you want to do. So let's assume that you're at least using the 9 base structure. We have a single core base, and you have 8 bases surrounding it. So that core base is only there for securement. When you have those outer bases, you need to do a couple of things. Number one, you need to max out your defensive things. They don't necessarily have to be rifle turrets, right? They can be any kind of turret, or any kind of trap, or any of that. You want to max out your nutcrackers, right? 20 nutcrackers for your base defense. Very, very important. You need those 20 nutcrackers because there's no reason not to have some additional defenses, and as far as I'm aware, your deviations can't die. The next thing you're going to want is 6 of your creatures, right? 6 wolves, 6 bears, 6 something. And I think it's most important to keep those behind your wall as a second line of defense, because if they're out in front of your wall, they can be sniped or whatever. But if they're behind your wall, then when things break in, and when they start moving through your wall to start attacking your core base, they have to contest with your creatures while doing that, which makes them easier targets. So that's a good second line of defense, and your nutcrackers will also help a lot with that. And the next thing that is with your building concepts here is the height of your walls, because I literally mean you should build a wall. You don't want people to be able to see in, and you don't want people to be able to do things like bring 18-wheelers that have structures built on them that can be driven up to your wall so that people can jump over your wall and straight into your base, because that completely defeats the purpose of your outer layer of defenses. So you need to build high structures that can't be ramped over or can't have trucks brought up to them so that they can be jumped over. And then they need to have fortified positions at the top where you can have people standing and shooting. And then they need to have lots and lots of access points across the bottom where people can be peeking out from to also be shooting. So there needs to be lots and lots of places to shoot from tons of different angles all over the place. And the bigger your compound is, right? If you have, say, a 25 base compound, then those places that you shoot from need to be able to accommodate more and more and more people, because there's a good chance that you might get attacked just from a single side with a huge group of enemies. And if you've built your structure in such a way that only a small number of people can fight from any given point, then you start to minimize the number of defenders that can effectively be repelling that attack. So all of your defenders need to be able to attack from any point simultaneously, in case your attackers decide to all attack from the same location. You don't want to be fighting an uphill battle where maybe only 10 of you can be fighting against 25 or 30 people. That would be a recipe for loss. So I think those are some of the important build concepts. And the last build concept that I want to talk to you about is, where should you be on the ring? because it's important to know where you can be most helpful, because you don't necessarily have to be a part of a hive to join the ring. So what you need to look at is how often are you online? Because if you're not online very often, then you need to be further out on the ring so that your base just getting walked through doesn't cause nearly as much damage. And so that you're sort of a smaller link in a larger chain instead of a big link in a very small chain. So let's take a look at our visual aid again. And you'll see here that, you know, as you come out here, you get further and further and further away. People might not even necessarily attack from this location. So if you're one of the players who's not online as much, and your base is this one, there are still 25 other options that somebody might take out here, right? Or I think it's 22 other options that somebody might take out here. And if that's the case, then you're not being available to manage the defenses of this base isn't nearly as important. So your core base members, right, need to be people who are most active, because there's going to be stuff that has to be done, right? People are going to be needing to move securement units and stuff like that so that prism deviations can be placed inside of securement units. So these players need to be your active players, and these players in this first ring of defense need to be some of your more active players. And then as you get further and further and further out, the bases become less and less and less individually important. And so the players who own those bases become less and less and less individually important. And so it's not a problem if, you know, if you're only playing an hour a day or something like that, you could be out here on the third ring. Sure, your base is probably going to get destroyed, but you come back online, somebody loans you some resources, you rebuild the base, you're good to go, no harm, no foul. You could even give some people building permissions. You know, if you knew some people and really trusted them, give some people some building permissions, they go get your base rebuilt, you come back online, you're good to go. So the less you play, the further out you need to be. But I think that's all I have for the wall bases today. And when we take the sum total of the wall bases and the core bases, you get a really, really interesting dynamic in faction warfare. And I think we're going to have a lot of fun playing with this. But if you enjoyed the video or you've enjoyed the series at all, don't forget to throw a like and a subscribe on the video and hit the notification. I have one more base that I want to talk about. That's your core base, which is going to happen over here in the safe zones. And that should be a relatively quick video because it's basically just a PvE base. So we'll talk a little bit about that. So don't forget to come for the streams. I stream pretty much every day, starting at 11 a.m. Pacific time on both Twitch and YouTube, which you can find down in the description of the video. So thanks a lot everybody who came out to watch the video, and I hope you have a great day.